Okay, integration. Now, this is e-learning, and like I said, I'm not talking about e-learning, I'm talking about blended learning. So there's an integration needed. You have to integrate e-learning into your in-class phase. And this is then the question what comes up. E-learning is ready. What next? And many instructors who have produced e-learning have quite some difficulties to implement the e-learning in a blended learning environment, in a blended learning setting, for various reasons. Let's have a look at some options or scenarios that I have observed at my university as well as at other universities, how people deal with e-learning or how instructors deal with e-learning. Now, first of all, there is an option, and this is why it's here gray, because it's not really an option. Would be to use e-learning as a substitution of an in-class lecture. That would be a pure online lecture, an asynchronous online lecture where students do not any longer participate in in-class sessions. This is not what I'm talking about. This is not blended learning. This would be then distance education on online degree program. This is where you can use e-learning on a standalone basis. Then some instructors, that is what I have observed, they use e-learning, but it's not really integrated into the structure, into the methodical and didactical concept of the lecture. They use it as I have called it a non-interacting element of a classical lecture. So you join your instructor in the classroom, you receive a classical lecture, maybe with some elements, modern elements, but still then the instructor would say, yeah, and by the way, there is e-learning. You can watch some e-learning videos, but the instructor does not really explain how the e-learning is interacting with the sessions of the lecture. So this is why I painted it red here, because apparently this is not what we want to do. It's not enough. So the third option would be to make sure that the students watch the e-learning at home. And then this is what a colleague of mine is doing. He is re-lecturing the content in class. Well, the effect is that after 2 or 4 weeks, you only have 30% of the students in class. If there is no attendance required by the students, they will just stay away. Maybe that is his intention, because maybe he wants to have smaller course sizes, because students will find out after a while that there is no added benefit of being in the classroom, right? And they say, yeah, why should I come to the course? Why should I come to the sessions? Why should I go to the university? I can do something else because I can watch the e-learning at home or in the evening, and that's the same what I would hear in the classroom. Other students are afraid that they will miss some important information. They will go to the in-class sessions, but afterwards they are frustrated because then every session, they realize that there is no new information, that there is no added value of watching the e-learning videos together with being in class. So the fourth option is to use the e-learning as preparation and to use it in an inverted classroom model setting. I don't know whether you have touched upon the inverted classroom model today. Mrs. Tefi, have you talked today about?
No, I guess everyone has a basic idea, but we didn't have a common time for a common understanding of that yet.
Okay, maybe I share my understanding with you now, and then we can see whether this matches with your understanding. So, and this is what I will explain now. Use the use of e-learning as a preparation of an inverted classroom model. So the inverted classroom model, just a short explanation what I think what is a inverted classroom model. So if we distinguish the inverted classroom model, some people use the expression flipped classroom. Then there are some e-learning aficionados who distinguish between inverted classroom model and flipped classroom. They say flipped classroom is more for high school, inverted classroom is more for university. Then some people say inverted classroom model has a different methodical, theoretical background in comparison to flipped classroom. I found out for myself that the majority of people use flipped classroom as a synonym for the inverted classroom model, and this is what I will do here as well. Talking about the traditional classroom, we all know the traditional classroom setting. There is a phase 1 and a phase 2 that we can distinguish. In the collective in-class phase in the traditional classroom settings, students will listen to the lecture of the instructor. Transfer of knowledge takes place during the lecture. Then students will go home. Typically, they are on their own. If there is no teamwork, they will be on their own at home. And then the individual learning phase will start. Consolidation of acquired knowledge, exercising, working on exercises, working on homeworks. This is the traditional classroom setting. Now, while looking at the flipped classroom, it just flips these concepts, and also it enhances the concept to a certain degree. In a flipped classroom setting, the transfer of knowledge would take place at home in an individual, during an individual online phase. So students would watch the e-learning, and they would maybe work with the accompanying elements and material that has been provided in by way of the learning management system. Now, thereafter, students will join the instructor in class, or the in-class phase. And as you can see, the instructor is now visualized in the middle of the students, because what he will do is he will work together with the students on exercises. He will create activities, there will be discussions, he will try to consolidate the acquired knowledge while being in class. That is the idea of the inverted classroom model, which is possible to apply a flipped classroom scenario without e-learning. So you could also say to your students, go home, read the textbook, come back, and then we will do exercises while being here in class. But it is much easier, and is also to a certain degree convenient for the students if they can watch videos, if they can watch e-learning while being at home instead of just having a textbook. Okay, is there a question?
I think that's clear to everybody here.
Okay. So there's literature on ICM. I just show you the some of the literature. Probably you know, some of you have already consumed some of these references here. One of the classical pieces of literature is Flip Your Classroom from Bergman Sams, to teachers for chemistry who invented the concept or put this concept into practice in the US while teaching chemistry to high school students. Then there are some other articles more from and conference proceedings more from an academic perspective, from higher education, from the higher education perspective. Maybe that is interesting to you at a later point in time. I want to say a couple of words with respect to the methodical didactical framework of the inverted classroom model. What we know by now is that it is a learner-centered approach. It's not any longer centering the lecture on the instructor. The student is in the focus of the ICM. It enables self-directed learning, which from theoretical perspective is helpful if it comes to cognition and information processing. So students can control how fast they watch or how fast they go over the materials, whether they have to rewatch the e-learning videos or not. Thereby, the idea is that you create higher motivation, and it's really flexible in terms of time and place. So students can go to the PC lab at the university, or they can watch the videos at home. If the videos are responsive, they can watch them on a tablet, they can watch them on an iPhone or any other mobile device. Besides of that, if we talk about constructivism, it has been said that it creates a constructivist learning environment because it enables active learning. It enables, in a special way, problem-based learning, because when you meet your students in class, there is more time that you can spend on problem-based learning, because you don't have to teach the basics. You don't have to get the content across to the students. You can start right away on to learn with problems. And well, some people have said that you can teach solely based on problems. I don't believe in that. I think that especially if it comes to course contents like financial theory, you can teach that purely based on problems. There has to be some background knowledge presented prior to working on problems. And while being in the course room, the ICM enables collaborative learning because students then work together, they can work in groups, they can work as a whole, which should foster and support learning, at least from a psychological perspective. That should be helpful for students. Now, and then we can distinguish the left-hand side from the right-hand side. The left-hand side is predominantly accomplished by the online phase, whereas the right-hand side is accomplished in class. This is how we can distinguish that. And I'm not an expert in didactics or in higher education didactics, but this is what I have learned from studying some books and some materials, and this, at least this sounds to me, this makes sense to me, and up to this point, it also has been successful. This is what I will show you on one of the following slides. Okay, I would move on. I have redesigned I have recreated the perspective on my person as well. I don't view myself any longer as the professor or the instructor. I have termed it, I've thought much about what am I now, and I have created the term navigator. And so I view myself as the navigator for the students. And the navigator has to pave the way for the students, meaning you are the one who has to make sure that all the students, that the group of students moves into the right direction. That means if it comes to the individual learning phase at home, if it comes to preparation, you have to make sure that the students work with the material in the right way. So you have to make sure that you tell them that they, first of all, they have to watch the e-learning, that they have to answer end of chapter questions, that they should solve end of chapter problems, and that they should post and discuss their questions on the boards available in the learning management system. And that's what we talked about earlier. Now, this is the preparation. If it comes to the session in the classroom, you have to make sure that a collective clarification of unsolved questions takes place. I have to stress the word collective. Otherwise, students will stumble some of the content. They will not understand the content. They will stop to watch the e-learning because they know if they come to the in-class sessions, they can ask you every question they want to ask. This is why I said earlier, you should force them to post their questions on the boards. If then questions remain that could not be answered in a satisfactory way in the learning management system, well, you can come back to that and you can work together with the students in order to collectively clarify unsolved questions. So you more or less act as a moderator and not any longer as the instructor. Then optionally, you can discuss latest topics. Well, right now, a lot of things are going on. Let's say the European Central Bank decides to invest every month 60 to 65 billions in the bond markets. Well, students might have heard about that. They might have heard about that, have learned about that from the news, etc. So you might want to come back to these latest topics in the course room, but only if there are topics that need to be discussed. Then you start to work with the students. You start to work on cases and exercises. There are a number of methods. I will explain some of these methods in a moment. So methods like group work, active plenum, etc. Like I said, I will explain these methods in a moment. And then once students have worked on these problems and cases and exercises, you make sure that they are presented or discussed in the classroom setting. There are also various ways to do so. I will say a couple of words with respect to the options of presentation on the following slides. Last but not least, there's the follow-up phase, which is again an individual learning phase. Students will go home. They will study their own notes that were taken while being in the in-class session, while participating in the in-class session. And maybe then at a later point in time, again, questions might pop up. And again, students have the option to ask these questions using the boards. Now, the navigator has to pave the way. That sounds a little bit maybe dramatizing the function of the instructor. But what becomes important is this only works out, the whole structure only works out, this is my experience, if you have a crystal clear and precise communication. Yeah? Meaning every day or every second day, I send out emails to my students via the messaging system of the learning management system. So you have to constantly remind your students what to do, how to study, how to learn, what is due for the next week. Otherwise, they show up and they will not be prepared for the in-class sessions. My experience is if you constantly remind the students, I do that typically every evening, if you constantly remind your students, approximately 60 to 70% of the students will show up in a prepared way. Forget the remaining 30 to 40%. There is, at least that's my experience, there is no way to approach them, is no way to raise the percentage. Now that might sound again cruel to you, but I would say 60% success rate is really high, because my experience from classical lectures is that roughly 5 to 10% of the students show up having prepared themselves for the lecture, having studied the materials and the content that has been presented in earlier sessions. So I'm quite happy with the 60 to 70% success rate here. And still I'm trying to increase that, but up to this point, I found no option, no solution to do so. Yeah, you can put pressure on the students, but I don't want to do that. There is, for example, an option for a learning diary. You can force students to keep a learning diary, and you can force them to hand in a learning diary every week. Then again, the question is, under your internal regulation, are you allowed to do so? Currently, I'm not allowed to do so, so this is not an option for me. I have heard from other instructors that this is an option in order to bring up the success rate or the attendance level or the preparation level up to 85, 90%, something around that. So we will see whether I will see whether I will apply this in the future. I'm doing with another course I'm doing now. I'm trying to do it, but on a voluntary basis, and we'll see whether this will work out or not. Like I said, permanent reminders via the learning management system. This is key for a successful course. Is there a question from your side?
Looking at the round, yes, there's a question. Okay, I didn't quite get that.
Tessa, you have to repeat the question.
I have to understand the question. I'm re-asking. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, and I look at the colleague to correct me, is that he feels that this is still quite the common way of distributing information, standing in front of a camera or in front of a classroom and conveying the information. And the question is, how do you feel about more interdisciplinary and even more modern methods between the peers to teach themselves, sort of? Would this be an option maybe for you?
Yeah. Well, I don't think, well, it depends upon, it depends upon your students. It depends upon the degree program. It depends upon whether we are talking about undergraduate studies or graduate studies. And it depends upon whether you want to achieve a certain level of sophistication. There are concepts, at least I only can talk about my subject, right? There might be different subjects. If it comes to my subject, I have still the feeling that there is room for failure. And this is what I could see in previous times where I applied other methods as well. I don't think that students can deal or develop their own content. You can't do that with a second semester course in finance. It's just not possible. It's impossible. I'm doing it at the master level. And it's really successful, but that's completely different. Yeah. It wouldn't work out having every semester 150 to 200 students where the majority is not interested in the subject, where there's only reduced amount of time available in order to get the content across to the students. And finally, I'm not only teaching this course, I'm, as you may remember from the second slide, I'm teaching quite a number of courses and I have a limited time budget. If students are completely on their own, this is almost like a philosophical question. I know I will not be able to convince all of you, but if students are completely on their own without an instructor that has enough time in order to watch over what students are doing, there will be no output according to an academic standard. Sorry, that's my feeling. And I'm quite willing to apply other techniques where students develop their own content. I'm quite willing to apply this in different course scenarios or in different lecture scenarios, but not here, not for this course. This is what I found out for myself. Still, and this is what you will see from the following slides, students are highly involved. They are highly activated. And there are problems, they have to work on problems which are not trivial. It's not that they are watching e-learning and then doing some calculations and then they go home. There are highly complex case studies where they have to discuss, where they have to come up with judgments, where they have to convince each other, where they are heavily activated, where there are collaborative elements. But students would never be able to develop these case studies on their own. It took me weeks in order to develop these case studies. And still, I can see room for improvement. Although there might be some sort of a collective intelligence on the side of the students, I do not believe that they are in a position to develop their own course contents. Depends maybe upon the subject. If it's a simple subject, maybe they're able to do so, but not here.
Okay, thanks. We have some 10 minutes left and we would also use some more minutes for discussion. So,
okay.
yeah.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Quite interesting with how to you involve the students, and then
Okay,
yeah, maybe there are some more
let's
questions
go
from our
on.
side.
Okay, so what are the methods that I use in the course-room? I have tried, I think, 8 or 10 methods, but I always come back to the following methods. First of all, what I use, and this is what all of you will probably use, is what I have termed here the semi-active plenum, meaning the instructor is standing in front of the students and working together with the students on a set of problems. Well, this is traditional, and this is what students have asked me to do more and more. Because what I did is I did the following thing. My favorite technique, as you might have heard about that, is what I've called, or what is called here, the active plenum, where the lecture takes place completely without the instructor. So you can see here my position. I'm sitting, I have taken the picture, and I took the picture, and I'm sitting in between of my students. Sometimes I'm sitting in the last row, and I'm completely out of focus. And what we do is there are 2 students who are voluntarily chosen. They are volunteers. They are not forced to stand in front of the other students. And they only have 2 functions. There is one guy standing in front of the blackboard, and his only function is to take notes. Nothing else. He will not comment on anything. He will not involve himself in solving problems. His only task is writing. Then there is another student, which you can see on the right-hand side, and he acts as the moderator. He's not acting as an instructor. He's not acting as a, so to say, as a student instructor or teaching assistant or anything like that. But he's acting as a student that moderates the whole group of other students. He's not commenting on answers. He's just coordinating the discussion. So students have to raise their hands and they discuss with each other. And then he clarifies what the group wants to be written down on the blackboard. What I do is typically I hand out case studies, complex case studies. Sometimes students are able to prepare these case studies at home. Sometimes they have to prepare them. They get like 30 minutes or 45 minutes in the course room to work on the case studies. And then I start the active plenum. I completely go to the backside of the room, and then the 2 students take over and they do the moderation of the course, and they assemble the findings of the other students and they develop a solution together with the students. Now, what is interesting is students are not developing the content, like I mentioned on the previous slide, but they are developing a solution. And if I apply the terminology of swarm intelligence, it is interesting that that always in every situation where I applied this technique, students were able to solve the most complex case studies. I actually tested case studies with traps and not really mistakes, but with some traps and with information that is not required in order to answer the case, with confusing information just in order to confuse the students. And in every case, students were able to solve the cases. Because, like I said, if it comes to swarm intelligence, there will always be students in the room who will speak up and who will say, is there maybe a mistake? Then other students join in to the discussion, are joining the discussion, and then together they develop a solution. Anyhow, this is a technique where students said to me, we like it, but please, we don't want to do it every session because it's really stressy for them, and because it's activating them. And there's really a learning process going on while they work on these case studies. This is then why from time to time I use the semi-active plenum where I act as moderator. So this is my top technique, my top advice. There you will also find videos in the internet from other instructors. There's one very famous instructor here, Christian Spannagel in Germany. He is a professor for information sciences and mathematics, and he has quite some nice videos on YouTube and on his own wiki platform explaining this method. There should be also some videos in English, I guess. So this is a proven method as well. And then, of course, you all know that what is really good in an inverted classroom model setting is to apply group work, because this enables me to go around and to talk to all of the students. So I really have contact with all the students. I can see right away where there are problems, where students cannot go on with exercises, and I can help directly, I can help the students in a direct way. And there is time for that due to the fact that I'm not any longer trying to get the content across by lecturing the students, due to the fact that the content will be transferred by way of e-learning. I now have suddenly time while being in the classroom to talk to the students. And they really like that. And I have really a positive feedback on that. They think for the first time, they are able to talk directly to the instructor, and there is no barrier to speak up. If you're standing in front of the group, students are sometimes afraid to ask questions. They are afraid to ask stupid questions. And then if I walk around, I just sit, I just bend over, as you can see here on the picture, or just sit together with a group of students, and then I can approach them directly. I can talk directly to them, can make some joke, can try to relax them, and then they start to ask questions, which is really helpful for the learning process.